Well, we all make excuses for decisions we probably know we shouldn't make, and very often we see people who know that financial decisions they're making aren't the best decisions, but they still try to create excuses or explanations for why they're doing what they're doing. Today, we're going to talk about why these excuses usually don't hold water.
Welcome to the My Retirement Clarity Podcast, where our goal is simple, to help you close the gap between what you know and what you implement. The team at Perkins Wealth Management does this by helping good people make great decisions so they can enjoy an amazing retirement. And now, here's your host and financial advisor, Lee Perkins.
Well, hello and welcome in. Glad to have you on My Retirement Clarity. I'm Ben George with Lee Perkins, owner and financial advisor at Perkins Wealth Management there in Macon. Lee, we make excuses. It's all just kind of part of what we do. But, I think oftentimes we got to kind of, go against those and kind of push back a little bit for people that have excuses for the financial decisions they're making.
Yep, absolutely. And so I'm at my house. We live in an excuse-filled world because I got two kids at home. I guess Walker is in college now, but he is home for the summer. And I hear a lot of excuses for things all the time. So this should be a good show and see how we can transition this over to financial excuses.
Awesome. Looking forward to it today. Glad to have you on the show. If you haven't joined us before, thanks for being here. You'll find everything at myretirementclarity.com, and the best way to book a time to meet with Lee, it's just go to talkwithjlp.com. talkwithjlp.com. All right, I've got 5 excuses. I'm going to throw you the excuse, Lee, and I'm going to have you push back against it a little bit, okay? So The first thing here is when somebody wants to start Social Security at age 62, I'm sure there's a number of reasons why they might do that, but we'll often hear someone say something like, well, I've been paying into the system for years, and I want to be sure that I get my money back out before it all goes bankrupt. So why do you push back against that excuse?
Yeah, so this is one we hear pretty frequently, and I understand the mentality here. I'm not a very big fan of our government, and I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. And at this point, I don't think there's a lot of trust in the government by almost anybody. And so I think that's probably the primary reason for this statement. They fear that Social Security is going to go bankrupt, and I on the statement they do put a couple of sentences on there that make you think that, hey, we're in trouble and we could go out of business. But I'm here to tell you Social Security is not going to go bankrupt. Do they need to make some changes? Absolutely they do. But are they going to let Social Security run out of money? Absolutely not. So think about it this way. Who's the politician who's going to cut benefits for people who are already receiving them or people who are really, really close to receiving them? So the politician that does that is the politician that's not going to get reelected. And I've said this on the show multiple times. The number one job of any politician is to get reelected, despite anything else that they tell you. So they're not going to commit political suicide by messing with the benefits for such a large group of voters who are already collecting Social Security, who are almost eligible to collect Social Security. There's too many other things they could do. They could increase the amount of wages that are subject to Social Security taxes. That's probably the more likely scenario. They could also cut or alter benefits for younger people, for way down the road. And honestly, those people, if they change the benefits, a 25-year-old or 30-year-old, they're not even looking at it. So, it may not even affect them as much at the ballot box. But anyway, I don't think it's the end of the world that you claim Social Security at 62. Chances are, I would say nowadays, I might encourage you to consider drawing early rather than later. And nowadays, that's a little bit of a contrarian idea, and I haven't had the same opinion. That opinion has changed over the last probably 5 years or so. If you'd met with me eight years ago, I would have shown you a software, some kind of spreadsheet that showed you how delaying claiming your Social Security is going to get you an extra $50,000 or $90,000 over your lifetime. But what I see happening more and more is 2 things: people dying early, or earlier than they planned to, of course, and also people's health declining earlier than they expected as well. And so I would rather you get the money, collect that Social Security earlier when you're young enough and healthy enough to enjoy it. Because my clients that are in their mid-80s and late 80s and 90s, that Social Security just comes into the bank and they don't spend it. So it doesn't impact the quality of their retirement. So I'm a fan of an early Social Security, but don't just do that because you think you're not going to get, because Social Security is going to go bankrupt. To me, that's an excuse.
All right, very good. So that's the first excuse here we want to tackle. Here's the next one. I know people often take too much risk with their money, and there's a number of reasons why, but I know a common one we hear is that hey, I feel like I'm behind in my savings. I got to make up for lost time. I'm going to take on more risk.
Yeah, and this is a common one that we hear people say pretty frequently, and I understand where they're coming from here. And I do appreciate the fact that they realize that they are, not where they need to be. Maybe they're a little bit late to the game, but I would rather see somebody make some other adjustments, maybe save more money, put more money aside, or even address your expenses. That could be a better way to go. That could actually have more of an impact on your situation rather than just being more aggressive. So I always say it's not as much about how much money that you have. It's more about what you actually spend every month. And so, people that have a couple of $100,000 but don't have a whole lot of debt, they're going to wind up many times being in a much better spot than people who have $2 or $3 million, maybe got a lot of money, but they have a ton of debt. And so it's to me, it's simple math. It's money in versus money out. So yeah, you can take more risk later in the game if you want to, but I wouldn't do that with all your money. Certainly don't be super aggressive with all of your money. Do it with maybe just a portion. We use a phrase of buckets here. Give one bucket of money of being super aggressive. And that way, if the market does go backwards, you don't have to take a huge step back. I would rather you just maybe take a little bit more cautious approach than putting the foot on the gas and pedal to the metal, with 2 years left and just rolling the dice and hoping that the market makes up for lost time. So, yeah, that's not a great strategy.
Yeah, we always want to hit the home run, I think, even more so than ever now. We're always looking for that big score, that quick buck. But it's about staying the course.
It is, and singles and doubles are gonna win a lot of games. Mm-hmm. It's just the truth.
Yep, no doubt.
Hey folks, Lee Perkins here. I wanted to tell you about our brand new book called Next Phase: How to Retire in a Year or Less Without Regrets. It's all about helping you prepare for the next phase of your life, whatever that looks like for you. So, if you're ready to make the most of your next phase, or if you're already retired and aren't sure you're doing all you can to get the most out of your retirement, then you'll want a copy of this book. All you have to do is text Next Phase to 478-475-2050, and we'll send you a copy right away. You can also access additional resources and register for one of our upcoming workshops at our website, www.myretirementclarity.com. Thanks for listening. Now back to the show.
All right, continuing on here. Let's go with this one. I know a lot of people put a lot of money in cash and just hold a lot on the sidelines, and they'll explain it with, well, I lost a lot in the last market crash, and I don't want to go down that road again. So is it okay to be nervous and a little bit scared?
Yeah, it is. And again, this is another sentiment that I understand completely. I really do. I mean, if you were burned at some point in the past in the stock market, you don't want to risk getting burned again. But I'm here to tell you that the stock market will make you money if you maintain your investment discipline. Yep, it goes up and it goes down, and there are times that it goes down pretty significantly. And that can be very scary. It was really scary for people back in 07 and 08, and that time still haunts a lot of people. Even, 15 years or so later than that? Even longer than that, maybe 17 years it's been since that happened. But if you look at the history of the stock market, and I'm referring to the S&P 500 here, and we have a chart in our office that shows this. The stock market's been up 33 of the last 44 years. And so I'm of the opinion that the stock market is one of the best ways for you to outpace inflation. Because if you're too conservative, inflation, especially with the way it is right now, it can definitely tackle you from behind. So I think the best way for you to proceed is to have a diversified investment strategy. Again, don't put all your money in one strategy, because if the market tanks, you could lose a lot of money and you could sort of have a repeat of 2007, but you don't have to do that. Just have one bucket with that type of money in it. And each one of these buckets will behave different than the other buckets, and they're going to produce different outcomes. And so I think a lot of times, people just think they have to put, they think of money in the market as, it's going to behave like '07 and '08. That's not the case. Again, so our job as advisors is to not overcomplicate things. Let's don't try to outsmart the market or try to predict what it's going to do. Our job is to help give you the best chance of long-term success by helping you, again, make great decisions and just be better disciplined and more diversified in your approach to your money.
All right. So I know that it can be pretty tough because especially in recent years too, Lee. I mean, we've seen the market go up and down, just back and forth, and I can see how it can be very simple to just put your money on the sideline. But what is the stat like? If you just miss a handful of days, the best days in the market, you miss out on a huge percentage of the gains.
It is, and I should have that stat on a slide in my office so I can refer to it. And I've seen what you're talking about. Yeah, if you just, I think it's something like if you missed the top 5 or 7 days, trading days in the last whatever time period, I mean the results are just incredible. And that's why we preach, don't try to time the market, don't get out and get back in. I mean, because I've seen this for years. Something happens in the news, the market drops 500 points, and somebody gets scared and like, all right, I want to move to cash. I don't know where it's going, and then they move to cash, and then as soon as it's in cash, 3 days in a row, the market's up 500 this day, 400 this day, and 700 the next day, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, is it time to get back in? Well, it was time to stay in when you made that decision to bolt. So, yeah, it's about time in the market, not timing the market.
All right, let's go to another one, Lee. I know we try to make sure people are informed and educated with financial planning and investing and this sort of thing, and this is why we do the podcast. But I know a lot of people still will invest in things they don't know a whole lot about, and they'll just say, look, financial stuff just really isn't my thing. But everybody has to at least be aware and take a proactive effort on their financial side of things, right?
Yep, I agree 100%. Now, this is probably going to be the first one on the list today that I might argue that this isn't really an excuse, because the reality is that this financial stuff, as you just called it really is something that a lot of people don't understand. And I think, our school systems all the way from elementary through college do a horrible job at teaching basic finance to students. And so, the average person graduates from, whatever level of schooling they complete, they get a job, and then life happens. They learn whatever it is they do for a living, and they may excel at that or, become an expert in some area. But they never really learned the basics of general investing and saving for retirement. And so, a lot of these people wind up investing in their 401k, and when we see them years and years later, they're in the exact same investment that they were in when they first started. And so that's not a good thing. It would be, but they have actually earned the moniker of the financial stuff it's really not my thing. So, I think candidly nowadays we see more and more people who don't want the responsibility of doing all of this stuff that we do as advisors. And, of course, that's one of the reasons that our firm grows each and every single year. We see more and more people who would rather not be their own financial advisor, especially as they get close to retirement and they start discovering that there's a whole lot more to this than just the investing part of it. They'd rather partner with our firm and let us handle all that financial stuff for them. But yeah, I would rather somebody, have more in general. I would rather have people have a little more of a basic understanding of this, just because I think you need to be informed on what you have, and a lot of times people just simply aren't.
Yeah, so very true, and which is why also we try to provide a book offer. I need for anybody that listens to the podcast. I know you have a book that you'll provide anybody that reaches out and just wants to request it. They can get their hands on it, and it's another tool to help again continue to make people more educated.
Absolutely, yes. So the name of this book is called Next Phase: How to Retire in a Year or Less Without Regrets. And you can get a copy of that book. You can download it immediately by texting the word Next Phase to 478-475-2050, and you'll get a digital download of that book right away. It's got some really cool tips in there. There's even a chapter on there on how to invest, where I talk through the financial house that I reference many times on the show.
All right, again, very, very easy to do. Just text Next Phase 478-475-2050. All All right, Lee, let's finish it off then with one more. I know when someone doesn't want to leave a broker or an advisor, even when they know that they probably should, they'll often say something like, well, I've been working with him or her for a long time, and I don't really want to hurt that friendship.
Yeah, this is a tough one. This is 100% a relationship business in my mind, and people do business with people that they like and people that they trust. But when your circumstances change, I mean, sometimes that circumstance change can mean that you got to mix something up and maybe who you choose to work with to get you through whatever that next phase of your life is. Recently, I met with a guy he'd been with his advisor for probably a little bit more than 10 years. I met with him twice, and he told me that we helped him with things that his broker had never even discussed. I thought he saw the value because we showed him how that if he worked with us and implemented some of the strategies that we discussed in the couple of meetings, we would literally save him over $200,000 in taxes over his lifetime. But it wasn't enough. At the end of the day, he said he couldn't leave his current advisor because he liked him. And so that happens, and I get it. But the story doesn't end there, because he called me like 3 weeks ago and said he was now ready to become a client. And so I asked him what changed. And he told me he asked his advisor, again, this is somebody that's known him for 10 years, he asked him a simple question about Social Security and how his benefits would be taxed. And the advisor told him that it wasn't something that he was allowed to discuss. And so, he came in a week later and moved $3 million to us, primarily because all the broker did was manage his money. And, again, if that's all your advisor or your broker does for you, you might want to reevaluate that relationship and just make sure that you are getting everything you need from the person that you're working with. And yeah, sometimes that means you may have to end a business relationship. Doesn't mean that you can't still be friends with them, but you just let them know that you are going in a different direction, and they'll understand it. Trust me, it happens.
Yeah, it's just business when you come down to it, but it's important to look out for your money. It is yours. You've worked hard for it, and you want to protect it, so you want to make the best decision for that. And if you want to learn more about how J.L. Perkins Wealth Management can help you out with your financial future, trying to get to your retirement goals, just go to myretirementclarity.com. You'll find plenty of information on the website to help you out. But if you just want to go ahead and just sit down with Lee and schedule a meeting, the best way to do that is talkwithjlp.com. Again, talkwithjlp.com, and pick a time out that works for you. All right, Lee, we'll close it out on that note. A good conversation. Got to combat those poor excuses. And again, that's why you work with an advisor, right? To hold you accountable and to keep you on track with the stuff.
Absolutely. We want to help people make really good decisions so they can enjoy an amazing retirement.
Well, we appreciate you listening to this episode of the podcast. Thanks for your support. Please hit subscribe wherever you listen. We'd appreciate that. And a new episode coming in a couple of weeks. We'll talk to you then. Take care, Lee.
See you, man. Hey there, Lee Perkins here. If you're like a lot of folks, you've been listening to this podcast for a long time now. But I've got an important question for you. Have you implemented any of the ideas that we've discussed on the show? If you haven't, what are you waiting on? You know you're not getting any younger. So here's my challenge. Don't just consume the content. Our number one goal for this podcast is to help you close the gap between what you know and what you implement. So if you're ready to implement, take that first step today and visit www.talkwithjlp.com and schedule a 15-minute phone call with one of our advisors, and we'll help you close the gap between what you know and what you implement so you can enjoy the next phase of your life. Now is your time. Don't procrastinate any longer.
Investment advisory services are offered by J.L. Perkins Wealth Management, a registered investment advisor and insurance agency. Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, legal, or investment advice. Always consult with a qualified tax, legal, or investment professional before taking any action.